Carian Sorcery Sword got buffed in the latest patch. So let's actually make a build out of the weapon because I think that it's one of my favorite weapons in the entirety of the game right now. Before we do so though, I do think that I need to answer a couple of I know that are going to be frequently asked questions. Because this build, it has tools, but it doesn't have like the different tools the different builds would have. So then let's talk about the strengths and the weaknesses of the weapon and why would we want to be using this instead of a regular catalyst, because that's the main thing about the weapon, that it functions as a catalyst. You don't need a sorcery staff because it replaces the heavy attack animation, the heavy attack button, with just a regular catalyst. The big question, how good is compared to a regular catalyst? Like for example, how good would it be compared to the Carian Regal Scepter? It's not that good. Like, it does have like quite of a bit of a downgrade in damage, and it's actually quite substantial. That being said, the usage that we're going to have for this weapon is just for conveniency. In the big scheme of things, is this going to be better than just a regular full-on mage? Of course not. It won't. But the thing is that a regular full-on mage would have the inconveniency that whenever you are getting muffed, whenever you have the enemy on the face, you have to be swapping spells or you have to be swapping weapons for you to be able to fight them off. Which is not that big of a inconveniency if you're very nimble with your fingers. So for example, you can change very fast, very swiftly to the Carian Slicer or to your regular main weapon that you're using, or maybe you have a sorcerer's staff on the offhand and then you have your main weapon, the main hand. Those are all of the different things that this build, which is just that, it's a different build with different tools that are going to make it amazing. So first and foremost, the damage, even though that it is not going to be as good as a full Carian Regal Scepter mage, it's still going to be sufficient enough and you're able to see it throughout the rendition of the gameplay. The damage is still quite substantial, the damage is still filthy damage for a Spellblade that doesn't rely fully on spells, but rather being a warrior as well. The second benefit that this weapon is going to have is that when you're getting muffed, when you're getting the enemies in your face and you really desperately need to cover yourself for some damage, you can use the magic shield on your weapon and still have a offensive option. Which is something that you can't do if you're a regular mage, because you either have like the magic armament, which some people are going to say, well, just use a regular magic armament on the weapon. No, because the damage is already going to be amazing, because the weapon has S scaling on magic, so that's amazing. So we can have a imbued magic shield, and this is an S stock, meaning that you can poke from behind the shield. This is just the most versatile mage that you can probably make in the entire game. It has lots of different defense options. It can attack from behind a shield. It can also cast spells, but at the same time be very defensive because of the shield and the poking. And the Ash of War, even though that it is not that amazing, I don't think that I don't know why did they decide to use the impaling thrust on this weapon if at the end of the day it's not a Ash of War that scales that well with intelligence, but it still manages to do what it has to do, which is getting the enemy out of your face. The damage wise, the Ash of War is not going to be that amazing, but you have more than enough damage to make up with all of your spells that you have in your roster. So let's talk about the stats. We have 80 intelligence, 81 is just a byproduct of the helmet that I'm wearing, that we'll talk about that in a little while. And then dexterity 19, that is just a weapon requirement. Strength, I have 14, that is a byproduct of my styling class. As a matter of fact, you should have this in 10, because 10 is the weapon requirements for the weapon. And then we have 15 on endurance, because the weapon is not actually that heavy, and that means that we can use just enough stamina that we need to bypass the 51 points threshold, and we're able to do so with this build. As much mind as possible because we are a caster, and I'd say that vigor on 50 is fine. If you want to add a little bit more survivability, tone down intelligence all the way to 70 to have vigor on 60. Our main weapon, and catalyst for that matter, is going to be the Carian Sorcery Swords. This has an S scaling on intelligence, and just as a base damage for a thrusting sword for an S stock, it has an amazing attack range of 600. 600, nearly 600, not necessarily 600, but nearly 600, which for a fast attacking weapon that can poke from behind a shield that is imbued by magic shield, this is just a monstrous weapon to have right here, that it can also cast sorceries. Then the kite shields, you can by all means change this one right here. Just make sure that you're not using anything heavy, because we don't have that much endurance, and that it doesn't have that much strength requirement, because then again remember that we only need 10 strength. As for the armor, the only thing that you need to know about the armor is that you have to bypass the 51 poise threshold. And as a matter of fact, right here, if we do this with Relentless's armor, the Graves of Solitude, and any kind of gloves, it doesn't necessarily have to be like anything fancy, just something that allows you to retain that medium load and sustain that 51 poise threshold. As a matter of fact, if we take care of this, just these two guys alone allow you to have the medium roll that we have right here without the necessity to, this actually is 51 poise, just between these guys right here. So yeah, that's nice. As for the talismans, we have 3 that I consider to be the must talismans. The Magic Scorpion Charm, this 12% more magic damage, and then we have the Graven Mass talismans to increase the potency of our sorceries. You can change the Radagon icon with something different, but I think that I like to have the shorter spell casting time. So those are the 3 that I consider to be a must. And then you have an extra slot to allocate whichever that you would want to have right there. My advice, for example, is the Spear talisman, because we can poke from behind the shield, and that enhances the counterattacks for our actually high damaging Carian sword on itself. But you can by all means have, if you want to have like a heavier armor, you can have the Great Jaw talisman, Arsenal talisman, Earth Tree favorite +2, or maybe a little bit more stamina because we don't have that much endurance, so Turtle talisman is always fine right here. The spells really are up to your personal preference. I just consider that you should have like 2 as a must. Remember that when you're building a mage or a sorcerer, it's always going to be dependent on what kind of school type of magic are you using. Are you using Carian magic? Are you using gravitational magic? Depending on the type of magic that you're using is usually the staff that you're using. However, we don't have a specific staff in here. All of the magic sorceries that we use, regardless of the type and school, are going to function equally fine right here with the weapon that we're using. But the one that I do advise for you to use as a must is a Scholar's Shield right here to imbue our shield. Remember that we don't have that much endurance, and that our shield is actually not that great, so this alleviates that a little bit. And then Terra Magica, that gives you plus 20% more magic damage whenever you're standing right there. And since you have very defensive options, this never has a mage been more defensive than this one right here. This one can sustain the Terra Magica as much as he wants because he has his shield, and if the enemy closest to you, you already have your thrusting sword to sustain that medium ground right there. The mix of Wondrous Physique is actually quite simple. We have the Magic Shrouding Crack Thea right here to increase our magic damage by 20% as well. And then the Cerulean Hidden Thea, this has been nerfed, so feel free to change this one right here. Although this allows you to use the cheesiest magic possible, like for example the Comet Azure, which is very doable as well with this build. But feel free to change it to whichever support kind of crack tier that you would like to use, like the Greenburst Crystal tier. Your Mimic tier actually works perfectly fine with this build, so the Glow War Crystal tier, that's actually quite nice as well. Anything really that you would want to add in here. This build just has so many strengths, and it works perfect with the Mimic tier as well, because your Mimic tier is also going to be using your spells, your sorceries that you have attuned to your character. So yes, then again, I know that I'm going to sound a little bit redundant in here, but I want to stress out as much as I can possibly can that yes, I know that you can, for example, imbue a regular S-Tuck and it would have like more damage than your sword, but then you would be losing your defensiveness of your shield, or you for example, if you want to have like a melee option, you can use Carian Slicer. Yes, but that requires for you to be changing in between spell slots, and if you're fighting something very aggressive, it's difficult to manage. So I'd say that with a little bit of a downside in damage, which is not that much, mind you, it's the damage as you were able to see all throughout the rendition of the gameplay on new bosses from New Game Plus 4. This is just as viable as it gets. With a mage that is round as it gets. You have defense, you have offense, you have utility, everything that you need with this mage. You can achieve it because of this weapon. I can't stress enough how much I am in love with this weapon. Anyways, if you like the content, like it, very super appreciated. And also you today, you're gorgeous, a beautiful person. You're in the gorgeous, a beautiful, beautiful person. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, join the Discord. I'll be seeing you beautiful people in the next one. Have a lovely day and goodbye.